This year marks the 10th generation of Google's Pixel phones. Now, before we get to them, let me ask you, did you actually think Google would get this far? I don't know, let me know in the comments down below. But for this year, while you might not see a ton of changes on the outside, Google has been hard at work to make some pretty big updates under the hood. So let's see what's going on. Let's start with the base Pixel 10 and Pixel 10 Pro and Pro XL. Now, they're both getting new actual and super actual displays depending on which model you're talking about, which pumps the peak brightness all the way up to 3000 or 3300 nits respectively. And that's up from 2700 and 3000 on the previous models. But as far as the Pixel 10's design goes, aside from some refresh color options, like they did bring back that indigo blue color from the original Pixel 1, which is pretty cool, you won't see a ton of changes. That is until you flip it around back. That's because this year, in addition to your standard main and ultra wide cameras, the base Pixel 10 is getting a new 5x telephoto zoom lens. Now, that's really cool because before, if you wanted a dedicated optical zoom lens, you had to upgrade to the Pro line or the Pro XL. Now, that's a really big win for anyone who just likes smaller phones or someone who didn't want to pay to upgrade to the Pro family line, which is a $200 price difference. So, not small change. Inside, you get Google's latest Tensor G5 chip, which Google says has a TPU that's about 60% faster than before, and you're talking about 30% faster overall performance. Then there's 12 gigs of RAM or 16 gigs on the 10 Pro and a range of storage sizes. Speaking of the Pro, while Google says both models come with improved speakers, the one on the Pro and the Pro XL are supposed to be the loudest on any Pixel yet. Additionally, wired charging speeds have been increased to 45 watts, but there's a new improvement to charging that we're going to touch on a little bit later. Now, of course, with the base Pixel 10 now having a dedicated zoom lens, Google didn't want the Pro models to feel shortchanged, so now they're getting what Google's calling ProRes zoom. And it's pretty interesting because it allows you to take a really high-res, long-range telephoto zoom, and then just using AI to kind of up-res, fill in the gaps, and it even pays attention to some of the smaller details like people's faces, so you don't end up with AI slop. Now let's change gears to the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, and last year's model was one of my favorite phones, actually one of my favorite devices of the year. Now, Google did slim down the bezels. You notice it the most if you look in that corner on the front screen, which is actually a little bit wider than before, even though the phone itself is actually a tiny bit narrower. But more importantly, I was kind of wondering that now that the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 is out, if Google was going to kind of chase that thinness game on the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, and instead, Google's kind of zagging. So what they're doing is that they're adding full IP68 dust and water resistance support. And that's the first time we've seen it on any foldable phone, especially here in the US. That's pretty cool because we've seen your standard candy bar phones get IP68 dust and water resistance, but not on a foldable phone, especially because you have a new hinge on the new Pixel 10 Pro Fold, combined with that new certification for dust and water protection. You're just looking at a much more durable phone, and that's before you even mention some new ultra-thin glass on the inside with that flexible main display. So overall, you're seeing some nice changes. It's still going to be a bit heavier than your Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7, but you are getting some added ruggedness. I also appreciate that even though the overall dimensions of the Pixel 10 Pro Fold hasn't changed that much, Google did manage to fit a larger 5,015 mAh battery inside. And then around back, there is a new 48 megapixel main sensor, along with the same ultra-wide and 5x telephoto zoom lenses we had before. Unfortunately, because they do use different sensors, the Pixel 10 Pro Fold is not going to get ProRes zoom, and it's not going to get the 50 megapixel portrait shots that are available on the other Pro models. Now, of course, this wouldn't be a Pixel phone launch without a bunch of new software and AI-powered features, and there are a ton. And so we're gonna have to do this kind of lightning round style because there is so much to cover. The new Magic Queue feature uses AI to help surface information like flight reservations, forecasts, addresses, and dinner reservations, so they appear right inside the app that you're already using when you actually need them. And depending on what kind of information is, you can actually tap on it and it'll send that information to someone who might have messaged you asking for that info. And then there's Daily Hub. It's kind of like a centralized digest for all the things that might be important to you. It puts all your important calendar appointments and stuff like that and reminders if you need to get to a meeting or you gotta remember to pick up the groceries today. That's where it'll be. It's kind of like the Now Brief feature we've seen on Samsung's Galaxy S24 and S25 lines, but this is kind of Google's take on that. There's also a new Pixel Journal, which is kind of like your digital diary. you can write down your thoughts, and it'll kind of surface information and ask you to reflect on things so that, hey, if you want to be a little bit more cognizant or, take a little bit of time to stop and smell the roses about what you're doing every day, that's what that's for. Of course, those are just the general features. There's also some new AI-powered camera features as well, the most notable one being Camera Coach. And the idea is that for anyone who wants a little help or maybe some just recommendations about how to get different angles, compose your shots a little better, or just kind of think outside the box, and it will even surface recommendations on how to get you to those compositions by giving you step-by-step tutorial. There's even a new natural voice photo editing feature. If you want to do an edit and you don't want to stand there tapping on every single reflection, you can just be like, hey, can you remove all the reflections in the photo? And it'll go and do just that. And you can even see a quick side-by-side so you know what it's doing. Because there's all these new AI-powered editing tools, Google wants to make sure that there's no confusion about how you got these photos, at least in their first-party apps. So Google is supporting a full C2PA certification so that if the camera app is producing an AI-generated edit or just a complete AI-generated composite image, it'll say that directly in the metadata, so you can't fool anybody about what is and isn't AI. Now, I kind of touched on this before, but there is one other really big addition that Google is adding to the Pixel 10 line, and that is full Qi 2 wireless support. I've been asking for this for so long, and it's just such a nice boost to general convenience and usability. Now, on the Pixel 10s, Google is calling this new feature Pixel Snap, but because it is the official Qi 2 spec underneath, it will work with a bunch of third-party accessories. But Google's also set on building out an ecosystem of accessories. Not only do you get faster up to 25-watt wireless charging speeds, which is a big jump from 15 watts that you got on previous models, and you don't have to worry about, do I need the right case to add Qi 2 support to my device like you do on late model Samsung phones. But most importantly, we're finally getting some real Qi 2 support on the Android side from one of the major manufacturers, and this I really hope will open up Qi 2 wireless support for the whole Android ecosystem as a whole. And lastly, with pricing of the new models staying pretty much flat year over year, there is a lot to like about the new Pixel 10 family. Now, the base Pixel 10 is going to start at $800, same as last year, and the Pixel 10 Pro and the Pixel 10 Pro XL are going to go for $1,000 and $1,200 respectively. Unfortunately, that does mean the Pixel 10 Pro Fold at $1,800 is still really expensive, but we are going to have to wait a little bit on that one because it's not going to be available until sometime later in October. That said, they are all going to be available for pre-order starting today, so if you want to get a jump on it, you know where to go. But that's a really quick look at what is going on with the new Pixel 10 family. But stay tuned for more because there are so many features that we are going to have to wait until we actually can review these properly to give our final opinion on them. But what are you most excited about for the Pixel 10 line? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, stay tuned to Engadget for more news, reviews, videos, and hands-ons.